If you'd like to see how I did these orange polygel nails, please keep watching. Starting off with just dehydrating and cleansing the nail with rubbing alcohol, and then grabbing my favorite square tips from Nails by Dev, and my favorite brush on glue. This is from Young Nails. Super easy to use and less messy than the glue that you have to squeeze out of a tube. Just sizing those tips and gluing them on and holding them for about 10 seconds so that I can make sure they're secure. Next, I'm just seasoning this sanding band before I go in and blend the tips, just to make sure that I don't cut myself or anything. And I should mention that I am doing my non-dominant hand, so if anything looks a little awkward or I'm moving a little slower, it's because I'm doing my non-dominant hand for this video. And I'm using the sanding band on a very low speed, about 3 RPM, and I'm doing my best to just focus on the nail plastic tip itself and not the natural nail. I don't want to overfile the natural nail. You can also use a hand file to blend the tips. I just feel like an e-file is more precise. Now moving on to the next step, just putting on some gloves and grabbing my base coat and my slip solution, which is 70% isopropyl alcohol, and the polygels that I will be using from Rosalind. And these are also linked on my Amazon storefront. Super nice pink shades for spring and summer. And this is the brush that I use for polygel application. It's the Kads Kolinsky brush, also on my Amazon storefront under the polygel list. Now we are taking Young Nails Protein Bond as our primer and putting on 1 coat of that, taking my base coat and putting on a thin layer on each nail and curing in the lamp. Using a base coat before polygel application is a very important step to ensure that your nails last. And now we are moving on to application, starting with that first bead near the free edge, just using my brush in a patting motion, really just pat, 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 drag it down, keep cleaning up those sidewalls so that your product isn't too bulky at the sides, and then you don't have to do as much filing. Again, I am doing my non-dominant hand, so it is a little awkward for me, but also just goes to show that you can definitely do polygel on your non-dominant hand. It just takes a little bit more time and practice. Now, when it comes to polygel application, I like to work in smaller beads, especially if I am working on a longer set of nails. So that first bead during the free edge I had cured before I went in with the second bead. And here I am just working on the cuticle area, trying to make sure it's really flush. And just continuing to drag that product down and smooth it out. The key to polygel, I feel like, is really focusing on this patting motion like I'm doing here when you're first laying down that product. And then from there, making sure that you use your brush to maneuver it where you'd want it to go. And then, dragging it out when you're ready to kind of smooth it and level it out. Polygel, I feel like depending on the brand, can be more sticky or more stiff. And you can use more or less isopropyl alcohol, just depending on the consistency of the product. So working on that second nail here, you can see that my strategy, I guess, with this nail set, especially on my non-dominant hand, was, kind of lay down 1 bead near the free edge, another one kind of near the apex area, and 1 more near the cuticle area as needed. For the cuticle bead, I really try to work like very on top of the product, if that makes sense, and really using like the edges of my brush to really tuck it into that cuticle area as flush as I can, before kind of using the body of the brush to drag it down, if that kind of makes sense with what I'm showing here in this video. And after finishing application on my hand, I moved on to shaping. I actually started off with cleaning up the cuticle area a little bit just to get a sense of where I needed to debulk, which I'm using my round pana bit for that here. This is one of my favorite bits. It's also on my Amazon storefront. I can use it for so many different things. I love it for cleaning under the nail and carving out that C-curve. And just thinning out the free edge just really helps with that. Now just finishing off with an 80/80 grit hand file to file the free edge and file the sidewalls as straight as I can. And you can see my gloves were way too big for me, and for some reason I was still using them. And this is usually the last step for me when it comes to shaping. Now moving on to nail art, don't mind my messy palette here, just trying to get the color I wanted and settled on this orange and white, putting down a thin layer of blooming gel and scooping up that orange and white mixture and just laying it down on the nail, and the blooming gel really does what it needs to do and spreads out all the color, and I just kind of guided it a little bit where needed. And I apologize, I did not film my non-dominant hand for the nail art, but wanted to show you the rest of the process here. So using that blooming gel and then scooping up that orange and white gel polish and just putting it at the edge of the nail. I'm using Mia's Secret blooming gel, which is my favorite. I feel like it works really well and helps the color spread around. And after finishing off with top coat and some cuticle oil, this is basically how the final look turned out. Thank you for watching.